I had always thought of my kitchen as the safest place in the house. It was where Harold used to read the morning paper while I made his coffee, where the smell of cinnamon rolls on a winter morning could make the world feel softer. But that morning, all of that warmth felt far away. Sitting on the polished oak table was my credit card statement, the envelope torn open and tossed aside. At first, I didn't think much of its statements come at the end of every month, and I usually skim through them before tucking them into the file drawer. But then my eyes stopped. $15,000. The number sat there in black ink, bold enough to make my heart skip. Beneath it, the charges lined up like a cruel inventory. $3,100 to Rose and Ivy Floral Designs, $6,000 to Lakeshore Ballroom, $5,900 to Ashton Catering Services. I read them twice, then again, hoping I'd somehow misunderstood. But each time, the truth hit harder. These weren't my expenses. I hadn't stepped into a florist in months, hadn't set foot in any ballroom. And then I remembered 4 years ago, after a late-night call from Clara about a flat tire and no cash on hand, I'd added her to my card for emergencies. Emergencies. The word rang in my head now, empty and mocking. The pen I'd been holding slid from my hand and rolled across the table. This wasn't an accident. It was a choice. A string of choices that my daughter had made without a single word to me. This was the card I used for groceries, for gas, for the small things that fit within the tight corners of my pension. Every dollar came from the teacher's retirement I'd earned over 37 years, and the shrinking life insurance Harold had left behind. I traced my finger over the venue fee, $6,000, and wondered how Clara could sign off on that without blinking. In the corner of the table sat Harold's old coffee mug. I'd never been able to put it away. He would have known what to say, how to draw the truth out without letting anger run the whole conversation. But Harold wasn't here, and the quiet weight of that reality pressed harder on my chest than it had in months. Outside, 2 sparrows hopped along the deck rail, pecking at crumbs from yesterday's toast. They looked free. I felt anything but. I picked up the statement again, but the numbers blurred as my eyes stung. $15,000. My daughter's dream wedding, paid for with my careful savings, without my permission. Somewhere along the way, while I was trying to hold my family together, something had shifted. And now I was staring at the proof spread across my kitchen table, like a wound I didn't know how to close. I didn't even have time to finish my coffee before my phone buzzed against the countertop, the screen lighting up with a message from Clara. "Hey, Mom, could you grab some groceries for us? Running late with wedding stuff." Just the usual. "Thanks." Just the usual. As if we were talking about me refilling the salt shaker or picking up milk, not $15,000 charged to my credit card without a word. I set the phone down face first and stared at it for a long moment, my fingers itching to type out everything I was feeling. But the truth was, if I responded now, the words would be too sharp, too raw, and I'd be accused of being dramatic. I'd been accused of that before, whenever I dared to object to being taken for granted. Before I could decide whether to reply, the front door slammed, rattling the pictures on the wall. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. My son had moved back in 6 months earlier, just until I get back on my feet after his divorce. At 36, he had perfected the art of turning temporary arrangements into permanent impositions. "Mom, I need to borrow your car tonight," he called, not bothering to come into the kitchen. "Sophie and I are going to look at an apartment in Lakeside." Sophie, the 27-year-old yoga instructor he'd been seeing for a few months, who seemed to think my home was her personal retreat. She'd set up meditation spaces in my living room, complete with burning sage that triggered my allergies. When I'd tried to gently mention it, Michael had accused me of being closed-minded and stuck in the past. "Michael, I called back, keeping my voice steady, though my chest was tight. Can you come here for a moment, please? He appeared in the doorway a few seconds later, looking impatient. His dark hair was tousled, and he was wearing the designer jeans I'd bought him for Christmas, back when I still believed that thoughtful gifts might bridge the growing distance between us. What's up? I'm kind of in a hurry. I slid the credit card statement across the table toward him. Did you know about this? His eyes flicked over the paper, then darted away almost immediately. It was the same look he'd had as a boy, when I'd catch him sneaking cookies from the jar. Know about what? Your sister charged $15,000 to my credit card for her wedding. There was a pause, then a shrug that felt like a slap. Yeah, she mentioned something. Look, Mom, it's just money. You can handle it. And Clara's been stressed with all the planning. Just money? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Michael, this is my entire emergency fund. It's a loan, he interrupted, studying his fingernails. She'll pay you back eventually. Besides, you've got the house, your pension. You're fine. Fine. As if the years I'd spent scraping and saving, the sacrifices I'd made to ensure I wouldn't have to depend on anyone in my old age, were some kind of limitless fountain. I stared at him. This grown man I'd raised, patched up his scraped knees, sat through endless parent-teacher conferences, supported through 2 failed businesses, and a marriage that crumbled because he couldn't hold a job longer than 8 months. And here he was, dismissing my financial security like it was pocket change. When is Clara's engagement dinner? I asked suddenly. His head jerked up, surprise flashing across his face. What? The engagement dinner. I haven't received an invitation. When is it? He hesitated too long. Oh, I think they already had it. Just a small thing. You know how Clara likes to keep it intimate. The lie landed between us, like a stone in a still pond, rippling out until it touched every memory of exclusion I'd tried to ignore, birthday dinners I wasn't invited to, school recitals I only learned about through Facebook posts, family pictures I wasn't in because you never like how you look in photos, Mom. I see, I said, folding the statement carefully. And the wedding? Am I invited to that? Of course you're invited. Don't be dramatic. There it was again. Dramatic. As if wanting to be included in my own daughter's life was some kind of overreaction. I stood and gestured toward the hook by the door. The keys are there. Have the car back by midnight. He grabbed them without another word. For a moment, I thought he might soften, might say something, to acknowledge the hurt he'd just left hanging in the air. Instead, he tossed over his shoulder, "Oh, and Sophie's staying over tonight. We'll try to keep it down." The door slammed behind him, and I was alone again with the statement, with the tight knot in my chest, and with the growing certainty that somewhere along the way, I'd become a stranger in my own life. I walked into the living room, my eyes drifting to Harold's chair by the window. It still sat exactly as it had the day he died 4 years ago, as though keeping it in place could somehow hold the past together. I sank into it, the worn fabric familiar under my hands. Outside, Mrs. Duncan from across the street was watering her garden. The Morrison kids were riding their bikes, normal families doing normal things. I wondered when mine had stopped being that. The phone buzzed again, another text from Clara. Forgot to mention, can you handle the catering deposit for next month? It's only about $2,000. Dad's life insurance should cover it, right? You're the best. Only $2,000. Dad's life insurance. As though Harold's final gift to me were a communal pot for anyone in the family to dip into whenever they pleased. As though it hadn't already been chipped away by medical bills. Michael's last business opportunity. And now Clara's dream wedding. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then, without thinking, I did something I'd never done in all my years as a mother. I deleted it, without replying. The silence that followed was sharp, almost electric. But I knew silence wouldn't be enough. Silence was just another way of enabling them. Another quiet yes to people who had long since stopped hearing no. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the background as I sat there, letting the decision take shape in my mind. If my children had decided that I was valuable only for what I could give them, then maybe it was time they learned what happened when that value was removed. The idea didn't feel cold or cruel. It felt necessary. I picked up the credit card statement again, folded it neatly, and set it beside Harold's mug. Tomorrow, I would start making calls to the credit card company, to the bank, to someone who could help me put my boundaries in writing. But tonight, I would sit here in the fading light, remembering what it felt like to be loved for who I was, not what I could provide. The house creaked softly as it settled into evening. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like possibility. The next morning, I woke before my alarm, the faint light of dawn spilling across my bedroom wall. I'd slept more soundly than I had in weeks, as if something inside me had clicked into place overnight. For once, the knot of anxiety in my chest wasn't the first thing I felt when I opened my eyes. Instead, there was a clarity, a strange calm, that almost frightened me. This was the day I'd start reclaiming what was mine, not just the money, but my sense of self. By 7 a.m., I was dressed, hair brushed, coffee in hand. I sat at the kitchen table, with Harold's mug beside me like a silent witness. The credit card statement was spread out in front of me again, its columns of numbers no longer blurring together. They were clear, precise, and infuriating. My first call was to the credit card company. I spoke with a woman named Marianne, whose voice was warm but efficient. "I need to report unauthorized charges," I told her, my voice steady, in a way it hadn't been yesterday. "My daughter has been using my card without permission for several months. The total is $15,000, all related to her wedding expenses." Marianne took the details without judgment, but her tone grew more serious when she explained the process. "If these charges are deemed fraudulent, it could result in criminal charges for the cardholder," she said gently. "I understand," I replied, and I meant it. For the first time in years, I truly understood that protecting my future was more important than protecting my children from the consequences of their choices. We froze the card immediately, and Marianne began the dispute process. I read each transaction aloud. The florist, the ballroom, the caterer, like naming witnesses in a trial. By the time we hung up, the card was useless to Clara, and I felt something loosen in my chest. My second call was to the bank. "I'd like to remove someone from my account," I told the young man who answered. "My son, Michael. He's been an authorized user for 2 years, but that ends today." The banker asked only what was necessary, and within 10 minutes, Michael's debit card access was gone. By noon, he wouldn't be able to buy so much as a cup of coffee on my dime. I expected to feel guilty. I didn't. I felt lighter. The third call was the most important. "Paula Green's office," a receptionist answered. "Please tell her Margaret Collins is calling," I said. A moment later, Paula's familiar voice came on the line, warm but tinged with concern. "Margaret, it's been a while. What can I do for you?" "I need to revise my will," I said, "and I need to know my options regarding unauthorized use of my credit card." There was a pause. "Come in this afternoon. 2 o'clock. By the time I hung up, I was halfway to the coat closet. I'd wasted too many years waiting for the right moment to stand up for myself. There was no point waiting any longer. Still, I didn't want to sit idle until 2 o'clock. Leap blank. I drove to Riverside Elementary, where I'd taught third grade for 32 years, just to park for a while and watch the morning drop-off. Parents hurried their kids toward the building, holding lunchboxes and backpacks, coaxing last-minute kisses before the bell. I remembered those mornings with my own children, Michael pretending to be too old for a goodbye hug, Clara clutching my hand like she'd never let go. I had built my life around those two people. And somewhere along the way, they'd learned to see that devotion as a bottomless resource. The phone rang. Clara. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. On the fourth try, I answered. Mom, thank God, she burst out. Something's wrong with your credit card. The florist called payment for the centerpieces was declined. I took a breath. Yes, Clara. I had the card frozen. What? Why? The wedding is in 6 weeks? We have vendors who need to be paid. I'm aware, I said, my voice calm but firm. She shifted into the pleading tone I'd heard 1,000 times before. Mom, come on. Just call them and tell them it's fine. These are legitimate charges. Are they? I asked. Because I don't recall authorizing $15,000 for your wedding. You said I could use the card for emergencies. If we didn't pay, we'd lose the venues. Your wedding is not my financial emergency, I said flatly. Silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, the wheels in her head turning, searching for the right combination of words to unlock my compliance. You're being unreasonable, she finally said. This is your only daughter's wedding. Don't you want me to be happy? That was the line, the one that had kept me in line for 31 years. Don't you want me to be happy? I want you to pay for your own wedding, I said. Like adults do. She inhaled sharply. We can't afford. Then plan a wedding you can afford. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were steady as I turned off the phone completely. By 11 a.m., I was at the hardware store, buying new locks for the front and back doors. The elderly clerk carried them to my car and smiled. Changing locks is easier than folks think, he said. Plenty of tutorials online. Back home, Michael's car was in the driveway. Inside, Sophie was making a smoothie in my kitchen, her yoga mat stretched out in the living room. Michael was at the table, scrolling through his phone. Mom. Finally, he said without looking up. Something's wrong with my debit card. And Clara's freaking out about some wedding payment. I closed your access to my accounts, I said, setting my purse on the counter. And I'm aware of Clara's situation. Sophie looked up, her perfect hair catching the light. Oh my God! Margaret, you scared us. Michael thought you'd had a stroke or something, making such weird financial decisions. Weird financial decisions. I almost laughed. Sophie, I need you to gather your things and leave, I said instead. She blinked. What? Why? Because this is my home. And you don't live here. Michael finally looked up. What's gotten into you? You're acting crazy. Sophie is my girlfriend. She's welcome here. Not anymore, I said. This is ridiculous. He shot back. Over some credit card mix-up? Clara will pay you back. She always does. When has she ever paid me back, Michael? The car insurance in college? The deposit for her first apartment? The loan for her master's degree? That's different. That's what parents do. No, I said quietly. That's what I did. Past tense. Oh. Sophie was already packing up her things. I'll wait in the car, she muttered, avoiding my eyes. If she leaves, I leave too, Michael said, his voice rising. Your choice, I told him. But if you leave, you don't come back whenever you feel like it. You don't mean that. I do. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. He glanced toward the door, then back at me, but I held his gaze until he looked away. Without another word, he grabbed his jacket and followed Sophie out. The slam of the door echoed through the house, but it didn't rattle me. Not this time. I carried the locks to the door and began the work. The click of new bolts sliding into place was strangely satisfying. Solid. Final. At 2 o'clock sharp, I was in Paula's office. The scent of leather and paper surrounding me. She listened without interrupting as I laid out the whole story, Clara's charges, Michael's freeloading, the years of small exclusions, and casual cruelties. When I finished, she set down her pen. Margaret, what you're describing is financial elder abuse. I don't want to press charges, I said quickly. I just want boundaries. Real ones. Then let's start with your will, she said. By the time I left, the revisions were in motion. Most of my assets would go to charity. Clara and Michael would get only what remained of my retirement accounts, and only if they repaid what they'd taken. Paula would serve as executor. The credit card dispute was underway, and my accounts were secure. Driving home, I realized my hands were steady on the wheel, my breathing even. For the first time in years, I felt in control. That night, I poured myself a glass of the good wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. This, I decided, was special enough. It didn't take long for the backlash to begin. By the time I finished my morning coffee the next day, the phone had already lit up with half a dozen missed calls. 3 from Clara, 2 from Michael, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. I'd made my position clear. But the silence I'd chosen was apparently intolerable to them. At 8:15, the pounding on my front door started. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the kind of impatient, insistent pounding you'd expect from someone who believed they had a right to be heard immediately. I took my time walking to the door, coffee cup in hand. When I opened it, Clara was standing there, still in yesterday's clothes, mascara smeared down her cheeks. I've been here since 5 a.m., she said, her voice hoarse. You look terrible, I said before I could stop myself. She stepped forward like she meant to come inside, but I held my ground. We need to talk, she said. Good morning, Clara. What's on your mind? The venue canceled, she blurted. They called yesterday afternoon. The final payment was due, and when they couldn't process it, her voice cracked, and she covered her face with her hands. 2 years of planning, Mom. 2 years. Now we have nothing. I studied her face, really looked at her. At 31, she still had the same ability to make herself appear small and wounded when she wanted something. But I also noticed the tightness in her mouth, the flicker of anger in her eyes beneath the tears. What does David think about all this? I asked. She hesitated. David doesn't know. I haven't told him about the money problems. He thinks everything's paid for. And why is that? Because I was going to fix it before he had to know. No, I corrected. Because you were counting on me to fix it before he had to know. Her chin jutted out. Mom, please. Just this once. Help me fix this. Just this once. The same phrase she'd used for every request in the past decade, whether it was help with rent, a down payment on a car, or paying off her credit card bills. I'd fallen for it every time. No, I said. She stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. What do you mean, no? I mean I'm not fixing your problems anymore. I'm not paying for your choices anymore. I'm not being treated like an ATM with a house attached anymore. You're my mother, she cried. Yes, I said evenly. I am. And for 31 years, I've shown you what unconditional love looks like. I've sacrificed, supported, and enabled you through every crisis. And in return, you've learned to see me as a resource rather than a person. Her tears changed less sorrow now, more frustration. So what? You're just going to abandon me? Let my wedding be ruined because you're having some kind of midlife crisis? I'm 65, Clara. If this is a crisis, it's a late life awakening. She scoffed. You're a lonely old widow who's driving away the only people who care about you. You'll end up dying alone, and it'll be your own fault. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. My hand tightened on the doorknob. Goodbye, Clara, I said, and closed the door. For several minutes, she alternated between pounding on the door and shouting apologies, insults, and promises. I didn't open it again. Eventually, her car started, and the sound of it faded down the street. Around noon, the cavalry arrived. First, it was Jennifer, my former daughter-in-law, standing on the porch with her hands clasped, looking uncomfortable. Hi, Margaret, she said. Michael asked me to come talk to you. He says there's some kind of family emergency. There's no emergency, I said. There's a consequence. I invited her in for coffee and told her the truth. The unauthorized charges, the years of financial dependency, the pattern of exclusion. She listened, frowning more deeply with each detail. I had no idea, she said finally. Michael always made it sound like you were happy to help. I was, I said. Past tense. She nodded slowly. I get it. I really do. He's struggling. The divorce was expensive, and his job. She stopped herself, realizing she was making my point for me. Jennifer, you supported yourself and 2 kids on a teacher's salary. If Michael is struggling, it's because he's never learned to live within his means. She left soon after, clearly regretting being drawn into the middle. At 2:00, David showed up, Clara's fiancé. I opened the door. Surprised. David, I hope you don't mind me coming by, he said, shifting awkwardly. I wanted to apologize. I had no idea Clara had charged so much to your card without asking. That, at least, was genuine. He explained how Clara had told him I'd offered to help with the wedding expenses, making it sound like a gift. If I'd known it wasn't your choice, I never would have agreed to it, he said. For the first time all day, I felt a flicker of hope. Thank you for saying that, I told him. He nodded, then looked down. Honestly, I'm starting to wonder if this wedding should even happen. We can't seem to have an honest conversation about money. And the way she talks about you sometimes. He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. When he left, I called Linda. She came over within the hour, carrying a bottle of wine and a bag of Chinese takeout. Rough day? She asked. Educational, I said. I'm learning exactly who my children are when they can't get what they want from me. We were halfway through dinner when the phone rang again. Michael. I put him on speaker. Mom, this has gone far enough, he said without preamble. Clara's a mess. David's asking questions. You're destroying the family over money. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm simply declining to fund it. You're turning everyone against us. I told them the truth. If the truth turns them against you, maybe the problem isn't the truth. His tone hardened. Fine. You want to play hardball? We're thinking about having you declared incompetent. The threat was so absurd I actually laughed. On what grounds? Sudden change? Irrational financial decisions? Janet Green has documentation of every choice I've made this week. Go ahead and try. There was a long silence. This isn't over, he said finally. No, I agreed. It's just beginning. When I hung up, Linda topped off my wine glass. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like I'm standing at the edge of a cliff," I admitted. "Terrified, but also free. The terrified part will fade," she said. "The free part will grow stronger." I wanted to believe her. Sitting there with a friend who asked nothing of me except my company, I realized it might actually be possible. The day after Michael's threat, I woke to the quiet hum of my refrigerator and the soft tap of rain against the kitchen windows. It was the first morning in weeks without a phone call before breakfast, and I sat there for a moment, savoring the stillness. But I knew better than to believe it would last. People who have grown used to an open tap don't stop rattling the handle just because you've turned off the water. At 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I found Ethan, David's friend from work, standing on my porch, holding a large envelope. I recognized him from Clara's engagement party photos. "Mrs. Collins?" he asked politely. "Yes?" "David asked me to drop this off. He said it was important you get it today." I invited him in, and he handed me the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $7,500 and a short note in David's neat handwriting. Half of the wedding deposits were for my share. I didn't know the circumstances when Clara booked them. I hope this helps make it right. I set the check on the table, my throat tight. Responsibility. Accountability. Two qualities my own children seemed allergic to. Sitting here now in the form of a young man who had no legal obligation to me whatsoever. "Thank you for bringing this," I said to Ethan. He nodded. "David's a good guy. He doesn't want bad blood, even if the wedding's off. He told me he respects you for standing your ground." After he left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the check. It wasn't about the money, though. It certainly helped. It was the acknowledgement. The understanding that taking from someone without permission required restitution, not excuses. By late morning, the quiet ended. My phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "Mom, I heard David sent you a check. That's my wedding money. Please give it back." I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, "I'm serious. It's not fair for you to keep it when you ruined everything." I put the phone face down and walked into the living room, determined not to get pulled back into her spin cycle of blame and guilt. That was when the knock came at the back door, lighter than Clara's pounding from the day before. It was Linda, holding a thermos of coffee and a plate of blueberry muffins. "Brought reinforcements," she said with a grin. We sat together at the kitchen table while I filled her in on David's check. She listened without interrupting, then said, "You know she's going to see that as a resource you took from her, not as a debt he was repaying." "I know," I said. "But I'm not managing her feelings anymore." Linda sipped her coffee. "Good. Because from where I'm sitting, she's had 31 years of management and 0 years of accountability." We were still talking when my phone rang again. Michael this time. I didn't answer, but the voicemail came through almost immediately. "Mom, we need to talk. Clara's telling everyone you're keeping money that belongs to her. You're making yourself look bad." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Classic. Shift the narrative so you're the villain." I laughed, though it was humorless. It's exhausting how predictable it all is. The rest of the day was blessedly quiet, and I used it to do something for myself for a change. I pulled on my gardening gloves and went out to the backyard. Harold's roses, neglected for too long, had sprouted unevenly, some canes healthy, others brittle and dry. I spent hours pruning, trimming away what could no longer grow so that the rest might flourish. It felt like a metaphor I didn't need to overthink. 2 days later, the next tactic arrived not from my children directly, but through a mutual friend, Karen. She called mid-afternoon. "I don't want to be in the middle," she began, which was always a sign that someone was firmly in the middle. But I ran into Clara at the store and she's really upset. She said you locked her out of your accounts and took money from David that was meant for their wedding. I see, I said, keeping my voice even. Did she also mention the $15,000 she charged to my card without permission? Karen hesitated. Well, no. She said you'd agreed to help. Then she lied, I said simply. And if she's telling people otherwise, I suppose that's her choice. I'm done defending myself in private or public. Karen shifted uncomfortably. I just hate seeing families torn apart over money. This isn't about money, I corrected her. It's about boundaries. And those are worth protecting. We ended the call soon after. And I sat in the quiet, realizing something important. I didn't feel the need to justify myself anymore. I had told the truth to anyone who asked. What others chose to believe was beyond my control. That night, Linda came over with a jigsaw puzzle. We spread it out on the dining room table, 1,000 tiny pieces forming a picture neither of us could quite imagine yet. You know what I love about puzzles? She said, fitting two pieces together with satisfaction. They only work when each piece is in its proper place. Force it, and you ruin the whole picture. I looked at her, smiling at the unintentional wisdom. I think I'm finally learning that about people too. A week passed without seeing Clara or Michael. The silence was different this time, not the tense, waiting for the other shoe's silence, but something closer to peace. I spent mornings in the garden, afternoons volunteering at the literacy center again. The work was grounding. The people there appreciated my time and skill without demanding anything I wasn't willing to give. One afternoon, as I was leaving the center, my phone buzzed. A message from David. Just wanted you to know Clara moved in with a friend. I think she's figuring out that not everyone will bankroll her choices. Hope you're doing well. I replied simply, I am. Thank you. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the back porch. The roses were blooming more evenly now, the garden looking healthier for the cuts I'd made. The air smelled faintly of rain from earlier in the day. Linda texted, Coffee tomorrow? I typed back, Yes. I'd like that. I realized then that my days were starting to feel full again, but full of things I chose, not things imposed on me. And that was worth more than any check, more than any strained apology. 3 weeks had passed since I'd last seen Clara in person, and in that time my life had been still. Not silent in the lonely sense, but calm, unhurried, and most surprisingly light. The phone didn't buzz with panicked emergency requests. The front door didn't slam with Michael's comings and goings. No one was using my kitchen like a personal cafe. Linda and I had fallen into a comfortable rhythm coffee most mornings, walks in the evening, and easy conversation that never once veered into guilt or obligation. It was on a Tuesday, just after lunch, that David's car pulled into my driveway. I recognized the steady way he parked, the quiet deliberation of someone who wasn't here to ambush me. When he stepped out, he looked different, thinner, maybe, and far more serious. He carried an envelope in his hand. Mrs. Collins, he said when I opened the door, though I'd told him before to call me Margaret. David, I said warmly. Come in. Can I get you some iced tea? He shook his head. This won't take long. We sat on the back patio, the roses blooming again after weeks of careful attention. I'd been spending more time out here, tending to things that grew because I nurtured them, not because I funded them. The wedding's off, he said without preamble. I set my glass down carefully. I see. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? He asked. Without accusation, just curiosity. I'm sorry you're hurt, I said honestly. I'm sorry that Clara couldn't be the person you hoped she was. But I'm not sorry you discovered the truth before making a legal commitment. He nodded slowly. That's what I thought you'd say. And you're right. He handed me the envelope. Inside was another cashier's check. This one for $8,500. This is the rest of the wedding expenses I benefited from. Venue deposit. Catering down payment. Those were for me too. And I had no idea where the money came from. I stared at it. The weight of the gesture sinking in. David, I can't accept this. Yes, you can, he said simply. It's my responsibility. What did Clara say when you told her? His laugh was short and bitter. She doesn't know. We haven't spoken since I called it off 2 weeks ago. I asked her to have an honest conversation about money and family. Maybe postpone the wedding. Maybe get some counseling. She told me I'd been manipulated by a bitter old woman who couldn't stand to see her daughter happy. The sting of those words was duller now. But it was still there, like an old bruise you forget about until someone presses it. And you said? I said if she couldn't see how she's treated you, then we probably weren't ready to be married. I could picture it. Clara's flash of outrage. The way she'd spin it into his betrayal rather than hers. How do you feel about it now? I asked. Relieved, he admitted. Which tells me everything I need to know. We sat for a moment in the quiet, the late spring air warm against our skin. I realized I liked David, respected him. Even. Here was someone willing to take responsibility for something that wasn't technically his fault. My own children couldn't manage that for things that were their fault. As he stood to leave, I said, You know, you'll find someone who matches that sense of responsibility, and she'll be lucky to have you. He smiled faintly. Thanks. And good luck with everything, Margaret. You deserve better than how they've treated you. After he left, I sat there with the check in my hands. It represented more than money. It was validation, acknowledgement, and most importantly, proof that my boundaries were worth keeping. Later that afternoon, Linda called. How did it go with David? She asked. How did you know he was here? I may have been watering my plants near the fence, she said innocently. I laughed. It went well. He's a good man. And Clara, well, she's about to learn what life looks like without a safety net. That evening, I was reading on the porch when a car I didn't recognize pulled up. Clara got out of the passenger side, followed by a young woman about her age. I assumed it was Melissa, the college roommate she'd mentioned once in passing. Clara looked different, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, clothes wrinkled, the polished presentation gone. Mom, she said from the bottom of the porch steps, we need to talk. Good evening, Clara, I said, then nodded at her companion. Hello, this is Melissa, she said quickly. Look, I know you're mad at me, but this has gone too far. David's gone. The wedding's off. I'm basically homeless. I need to come home. There it was. The inevitable return to the mother she'd excluded and exploited. No, I said. Her mouth fell open. What do you mean, no? I mean, this isn't your home anymore. You made that clear when you decided I wasn't family enough to invite to your engagement dinner. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Maybe I should wait in the car. And maybe you should, I agreed. When she was gone, Clara stepped closer. Mom, please. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? I asked. You stole from me. You lied to your fiancé. You excluded me from family events while expecting me to fund your lifestyle. You called me a bitter old woman when I set boundaries. I was upset, she said, the tears starting now. No, you were honest, I corrected. Her tears fell harder. I don't have anywhere else to go. You're 31 years old, Clara. You have a master's degree and a job. Figure it out. You're going to let me be homeless? You're not homeless. You have options, you just don't like them. What do you want from me? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I used your card. I'm sorry I didn't invite you. I'm sorry I said those things. It was rote, transactional. Sorry as currency. What are you sorry for, Clara? I just told you. No, you told me what you did. I'm asking what you're sorry for. She blinked, clearly not understanding the difference. You're playing word games. I'm trying to have a conversation with my daughter, I said. But I'm beginning to think that person doesn't exist anymore. The truth hung between us like a heavy curtain. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. So what now? She asked finally. We can have a relationship, I said, but it will be different. Based on respect, not financial dependency. And if you can't do that, then you've answered your own question. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked back to Melissa's car without another word. When the taillights disappeared, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. I should have known Michael wouldn't stay quiet for long. A week after Clara's visit, I was in the middle of repotting a fern in the kitchen when I saw his car pull into the driveway. It was mid-morning, and the sun was already pouring through the windows, glinting off the freshly polished counters. The moment he stepped out, I could tell this wasn't going to be a casual drop-in. He had that look, the one he wore when he wanted to appear calm, reasonable, and just a little wounded, as if to say, I'm the wronged party here, but I'm big enough to forgive you. Morning, Mom, he said when I opened the door. His tone was smooth, like a salesman's first pitch. Morning, Michael, I said evenly, wiping my hands on a dish towel. What can I do for you? He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, glancing around like he was checking for signs of change. House looks good. Smells like you've been baking. Coffee cake, I said. Want some? He smiled faintly. Sure, thanks. We sat at the kitchen table, just like we had so many times before, but the air between us was different now. I placed a slice of coffee cake in front of him, and he took a bite before setting down his fork. Listen, Mom, I think we need to talk about what's been happening. That's why you're here, I said. He leaned back, sighing like a man about to deliver bad news. I know things got heated, and I know Clara, well, she's got her way of doing things, but maybe we can work something out. You know, start fresh. I'm listening. I've been thinking, he said, about how I can help you more around here. Maybe I could mow the lawn, do some repairs, take care of the car maintenance, you know, man's work. And in exchange, you could, I don't know, let me use the guest room again for a while, until I get back on my feet. I almost laughed, but I held it in. Michael, I hire someone to mow the lawn twice a month, and the car goes to the mechanic for maintenance. As for repairs, you've never so much as changed a light bulb in this house. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. What's not fair? I said. Is you thinking room and board is payment for chores you've never actually done? He tried again, his voice softening. I'm saying I want to help, Mom. And maybe you could, you know, help me with my student loans in return, just until I catch up. There it was, the real ask. I'd been waiting for it since the moment he pulled into the driveway. No, I said simply. His face hardened. You're really going to turn your back on your own son? I'm going to turn my back on being used, I corrected. There's a difference. He shook his head slowly, as if I were the one who didn't understand. You're not acting like yourself. You've changed. I have, I said, and I'm glad. That stopped him for a moment. This is about Dad, isn't it? You're lonely, and you're taking it out on us. I felt a flicker of anger then, not the wild, reactive kind, but a controlled flame. This is about boundaries, Michael. Your father would have set them years ago. I just took longer to get here. He pushed his plate away and stood. Fine. If that's how you want it, don't call me when you need something. I won't, I said. He froze for a second, clearly expecting me to backpedal. When I didn't, he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I sat there for a moment, listening to the echo fade. Then I picked up his untouched coffee cake and wrapped it in foil. Linda would appreciate it with her afternoon tea. That afternoon, I met Linda at the cafe downtown. When I told her about Michael's visit, she laughed. He tried to barter chores for financial support. Oh, honey, that's a new level of creative. It's almost impressive, I admitted. But I'm done negotiating my boundaries like they're up for debate. Linda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're doing something most parents can't. You're teaching them, maybe for the first time, that your love isn't the same as your wallet. Her words stayed with me over the next few days. I realized she was right. This wasn't just about saying no. It was about redefining the terms of our relationships. For years, I'd blurred the line between generosity and obligation, thinking they were the same thing. They weren't. A few days later, the phone rang. This time, it was Michael again. But his tone was different. Flat. Almost resigned. Just wanted to let you know Clara moved into Melissa's full-time. She's not doing great. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. She's saying you ruined her life. I'm sure she is, I said calmly. There was a pause. You know, you could fix things between you two. Just reach out. Offer to help a little. No, I said again. The words steady, almost gentle now. Michael sighed. I guess that's it then. I guess it is, I agreed. After we hung up, I felt an odd mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because the distance between us was real now, not just circumstantial. Relief because I knew I hadn't caved, not even a little. That weekend, Linda and I drove to the farmer's market. We bought fresh peaches, local honey, and a bouquet of sunflowers for my kitchen table. As we walked back to the car, she said, "You seem lighter lately, like you're not carrying them around on your back anymore." I smiled. Maybe because I'm not. When I got home, I placed the sunflowers in Harold's old vase and set them on the table. The room felt brighter instantly. I realized then that I didn't need Clara's approval or Michael's presence to feel like my family was whole. Family could be the people you chose, friends who respected your boundaries, neighbors who brought you coffee, even strangers at the market who smiled without expecting anything in return. That night, as I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I thought about the life I'd built since saying no. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the picture I'd imagined years ago when the kids were little. But it was mine, chosen, intentional, and free from the constant weight of someone else's demands. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was bracing for the next request. I felt steady, rooted, and ready for whatever came next. Summer settled in quietly. The kind of summer where mornings start with the scent of fresh coffee drifting through open windows and evenings end with the hum of crickets under a soft lavender sky. I found myself living at a different pace, no more rushing to answer calls, no more scrambling to smooth over someone else's crisis. My days were mine again, and that was a luxury I'd forgotten I was allowed to have. Clara and Michael still called from time to time, but the conversations were different now. Shorter, less pointed. The requests had stopped not because I thought they'd stopped wanting things, but because they'd finally accepted that I wasn't the source anymore. That shift alone felt like a miracle. Linda and I spent more afternoons together gardening, walking by the lake, or sitting with iced tea on her porch while we watched the world go by. Sometimes we'd talk for hours, and sometimes we'd just sit in comfortable silence. I realized that in all those moments, I never once felt drained. That's how I knew I was finally surrounding myself with people who gave as much as they took. One evening, I sat on my back porch, watching the roses sway in the warm breeze. The garden had come back to life over the past months, fuller and healthier than I'd ever seen it. I thought about the pruning I'd done earlier in the season, how I'd cut away the deadwood, even when it felt harsh, to give the healthy branches space to grow. My relationships had been no different. Letting go of the parts that only drained me had made room for something stronger, something sustainable. I thought of Harold, too. He would have been proud not just of the garden, but of me. Proud that I'd stopped giving away pieces of myself to people who didn't see their value. Proud that I'd chosen peace over guilt and self-respect over convenience. That night, as the sun sank low, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, I realized something important. I hadn't lost my family. I'd simply redefined it. It was smaller now, perhaps, but more honest. And for the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling like someone was standing on my chest. Life wasn't about keeping everyone happy anymore. It was about keeping myself whole. And if that meant some doors stayed closed, then so be it. I had a home filled with sunlight, a garden in bloom, and the freedom to choose who I let inside. That, I decided, was enough. More than enough. Looking back, I realized the greatest lesson I learned was that love without boundaries isn't love, it's servitude. For years, I mistook sacrifice for care, thinking that giving until I was empty somehow made me a better mother. All it did was teach my children to take without giving back. Setting boundaries didn't mean I loved them less. It meant I finally respected myself enough to stop enabling them. I learned that you can't teach responsibility to someone while shielding them from the weight of their own choices. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is step back and let them face the consequences. It's not easy, especially when it's your own flesh and blood, but protecting your own peace is just as important as protecting theirs. I discovered that real family isn't measured by blood, but by mutual respect, honesty, and care that flows both ways. Choosing myself didn't mean I lost my children. It meant I found myself again. And in doing so, I created space for healthier, more authentic connections, whether with them, if they choose to change, or with the people who truly value me for who I am, not for what I can give.